everyone, what is up? Welcome back to my channel, Glam By Sam. For today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the Natasha Denona Retro Palette. And I know that in one of my last videos, I said that I wasn't going to buy this palette because I thought it was a little expensive and I didn't need it. But then a few days before it launched, a code from Sephora for 20% off magically appeared in my emails. And when I saw that code, I knew I had to pick it up because for 20% off, the price is a bit more manageable. And this is just a really beautiful palette and a color story that I'm really drawn to. So I thought I would review it for you guys today. So if you want to hear some information about this palette, some swatches, comparisons, and also how I created this eye look, then please keep watching. So the palette comes in this really pretty mauve colored outer packaging, and this color is the same as the palette on the inside. On the back we have all the shades and a layout with all the names, and then also the types of formula that they are. So the inside of the packaging is also a beautiful mauve shade, but it's a little bit deeper than the outer packaging, and then the palette itself looks like this. So as you can see, it is pretty much the same color as the outer packaging. So this is actually the midi-sized palette, which is the same size as, for instance, the Love palette, Bronze palette, and Glam palette. So you get 15 different shades in this palette, and let me show you what it looks like. This palette retails for $65, so it is quite an expensive palette, but like I was saying in the intro, I did get this with 20% off, so that made the price a bit better, but it's still like quite an expensive eyeshadow palette. But I do think Natasha Denona palettes are worth it. At first I was like, how can an eyeshadow palette be worth that much money? But then when I tried the Love palette, I kind of knew what the hype was about, and I just find her shades really easy to blend, and that is why I mostly love her palette. So this is what the color story looks like. As you can see, it's a beautiful mauve color story. We have some like purples, some like berries. We also have some shades that look a little bit more warm than the other ones, and then some beautiful shimmer. So like I said, this is just a color story that I am super drawn to. So this palette is also made in Italy, in case you're wondering, and it has a 24-month shelf life. I want to show you some swatches and comparisons with some other palettes that I think you might be wondering whether they are similar. And then after that, I'm going to show you how I created this eye look. And at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you if I think this palette is worth picking up. So let's take a look at the swatches of this palette right now. So right here I have swatched all of the shades for you. So the first one right here is called Glitz, and this is the beautiful duochrome. Then this mauve right here is called Andy, and this is a cream to powder. Then this one right here is called Jude, and this is a beautiful sort of like brown with a slightly green undertone, and this is a metallic. Then this one right here is a really light matte, and this is called Maud, and this is a creamy matte. This one right here is really light, but this is called Vivienne, and this is a cream to powder. I don't know if you're able to tell, but it's really light, so I was a little disappointed in this shade. This one right here is called Groove, and this is a creamy matte. I didn't necessarily like how this one swatched. Looks a little patchy, but as long as it applies well on the eyes, I'm not complaining. This one is called Opart, I think that's how you say it, and this is a cream to powder, and this is a beautiful like brown with a slightly green undertone, kind of similar to that shimmer right here. Then this one is called Psychedelic, and this is a beautiful topper shade. This one right here is called Go-Go, and this is a cream to powder that is a little bit more warm toned, really beautiful. This one right here is called Patty, and this is a cream to powder. Then this one right here is called Swing, and this is a metallic, really beautiful purple. This one is called Nude Mauve, and this is a creamy matte, and this one is a lot deeper on the swatch than it is in the pan. This one is called Rebellion, and this is a cream to powder, and this is a beautiful sort of like berry toned red. This one I think is called Helio, and this is a metallic. And then the last shade we have right here is called Amara, and this is a creamy matte. So this is what these swatches look like, really beautiful shades. Then I just wanted to show you some palettes next to each other that I think some of you guys are wondering whether they are similar. So first I wanted to show you the Natasha Denona Love palette next to the Retro palette, because I did think they were maybe going to be quite similar, but now looking at this, they really aren't that similar. There's maybe like 1 or 2 shades that are similar, but the other ones are just different. And as you can see, the Love palette has much more of that purple right here and a little bit more brighter pinks and reds. And then this one, I would say, is much more of a muted version than the Love palette. So I definitely think if you have the Love palette, you can still get the Retro palette and be able to create different types of looks. Another comparison I wanted to do is the Retro palette next to the Tartelette Juicy palette. And looking at this, I definitely say there are some similarities in here. For instance, this shade right here from the Tarte palette is pretty similar to this one from the Retro. Then maybe this one is a bit similar to this one. This one is maybe a bit similar to that one. But there are still some like bigger difference in the palettes. For instance, the duochrome right here is not really in the Tarte palette. And then the Tarte palette has a bit more gold and browns. And this one is just a bit more mauve tone. So I would say they are sort of like that similar vibe, but I wouldn't say they are identical. And I don't mind that I have both of these in my collection because I do like both palettes. Then another one I thought maybe was a bit similar is the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Instant Eye palette. And looking at these next to each other, there is definitely a little bit of similarities in here. For instance, this shade right here is pretty similar to that one right there. This one is maybe a bit similar to that one from looking at this. But then these like darker browns aren't really in the Natasha Denona palette. This one is pretty similar to this. This one is maybe a bit similar to that. But I would say this palette is definitely more of that warm tone rose gold palette. Like every look I pretty much create with the Charlotte Tilbury one ends up being pretty warm toned and more of that like peachy rose gold vibe, whereas now that I've tried this one, it's much more cool toned, and that is I think the big difference in this one. The shades may look a bit similar in the pan, but I would say this one is much more cool toned than the Charlotte Tilbury one. So really again a bit similar, but definitely not a dupe. Then right here we have the Charlotte Tilbury Fire Rose Quad, and of course these aren't like the same. This one only has 4 shades and this one has 15, so they're really different, but they do give me that same sort of vibe. Like this dark red right here is really similar I think to Rebellion, and then maybe also Amara. It's kind of like that same vibe. I would say this shimmer right here is maybe a bit similar to this one called Helio, and then these two are not really in the Natasha Denona palette, but they do give me that same sort of like vibe. So if you've been wanting the Fire Rose palette and you missed out on it since it is now discontinued, then maybe the Natasha Denona Retro palette can give you similar looks. And any last comparison for today's video I wanted to do was with the ColourPop Blush Crush. As you can see, one of the shades is missing, but I did think these were like sort of similar because these are also a bit of like mauve shades, and then I thought this one maybe like be similar to this one, but this one is definitely a bit more warm toned. This one is a bit more cool toned, but they both get that really pretty like pinky purple eye look, and I definitely think the bottom 3 shades in here are the most similar to the Natasha Denona palette. So something just happened while I was filming. I was doing my eye look and then I got this error on my camera that it didn't have access to my SD card, which was so strange because I'm using the same SD card as I always use. And then I just took the SD card out and put it back in, and then all the footage I just filmed was lost. But I've only applied 3 shades yet, so I'm going to go over what I applied just so you know. So I started this look by taking the shade called Maud right here all over the lid using a fluffy brush, and Maud is a creamy matte, so just like her regular matte formula, and I applied this all over the lid just so we have a nice base shade. And this shade is pretty much the same color as my eyelids, maybe a little bit lighter, but it's a really nice color to prime the lids with because I do have fairly oily eyelids, so I always like to go in with like a matte base shade before I apply the eyeshadows. Then I took this shade called Nude Mauve, and you also see that in these swatches, but I was actually really surprised by this shade because it kind of looks like a light brown in the pan, but when you apply it to the eyes, I don't know if you're able to see it, it's actually a really pretty mauve shade, and it's also quite a bit darker on the eyes than it is in the pan, so I was really surprised by that because this is a gorgeous transition shade, and this shade Nude Mauve is the same formula as the white shade right here. It is just her creamy matte formula, and I had no issues blending that whatsoever. Then I went into the shade Andy using the other side of this fluffy brush, and Andy is a cream to powder formula. I know some people love the cream to powder formula and others really don't like it. I have personally never had issues with the ones in my Love palette, so I just went into the shade and saw how it worked, and it did have less kick up in the pan. It's definitely a different type of formula in the pan, but when I applied it to my eyes, I didn't notice anything bad and it just worked really nicely. So what I did is I put this on this brush, then I just placed this on the eye, and then I blended it throughout the crease using this fluffy brush. And then I also took a little bit of shadow on this fluffy brush itself and put it through the crease to see how that works. So that was what I was doing when my camera decided to hate me. So now we're just going to continue the eye look, and you'll actually get to see what I'm doing and everything, because it's quite sad that you didn't get to see that. But as you can see, we just have this really pretty mauve look going on, and I really like the tones of this palette. I think shades like this are definitely my favorite. I just love mauve shades like this. So now I'm taking a sort of like flat fluffy brush, and I'm going to be taking the shade Groove right here, and I'm going to put that on the outer corners and then also blend it into the crease. So I'm just tapping this right here on the outer part of the lid. Like that, and then I'm going to be taking a different blending brush to blend that out. And then I'm taking a bit of that shade Andy and kind of like blend this out with that shade. And then to deepen the look up a little bit more, I'm going to be taking the shade Rebellion right here, which is also the cream to powder formula. So it's the same type of formula as the shade Andy. So in terms of performance, these shades are all blending really nicely. I like how this is looking. If I had to choose between the creamy matte formula and then the cream to powder formula, I'd probably choose the creamy matte formula. I find that formula a little bit easier to blend, but I'm not noticing any like big difficulties with the cream to powder formula. So I think the look that we have right now is really pretty. The shades blend well, and I am really excited to use the other shades. So let me know if you want to see a 3 looks 1 palette with this palette. So we have two shimmers that I'm really drawn to from this palette. The first one is Glitz right here, which looks like a beautiful pinky purple shimmer, and then the other one is Psychedelic, I think that's how you pronounce it, and this one looks a little bit more of like a topper shade, and those are actually also two different formulas. So I think I want to use the shade Glitz right here, because ever since this palette came in the mail yesterday, I kept looking at this one. So I'm going to use this one, and I'm actually going to be using my finger with this, and this feels like a really soft shimmer. Look at that, how gorgeous. It's a little bit more loose than I thought it was going to be, if that makes sense. So I thought it was going to be just like a pretty much like an opaque, very soft shimmer, but it's a bit more glittery, if that makes sense, and a bit less opaque. So I'm just going to build this up a little bit, and I find that when you like tap on your eyelid like this, it gives the most pigmentation and makes it the most opaque. This has a little bit of fallout, but I'm not like complaining about that. Can you guys see that shimmer? That is absolutely beautiful. So I'm just also going to take a little bit of this and apply it to the inner corner. And then this is what that look is looking like. So now I'm going to apply some mascara, and then I'll be back to share my final thoughts on this palette and tell you whether I recommend picking it up. So this is how the look is looking like now that I'm actually wearing mascara, and I have to say I really like how this is looking. I think the shades are absolutely beautiful. I really love the mauve shades, and I don't think I have a lot of these types of shades in my collection yet. I do have some like in different palettes with other shades, but I don't necessarily have like this mauve toned palette. In terms of quality, I think the shades work really well. Like I said, I do prefer the creamy matte formula over the cream to powder formula, but I don't have anything to complain about either formulas. I think they all work really nice. The shimmer looks absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you're able to see it, but it's such a beautiful shimmer. And I just find that the Natasha Denona shades work really well. I definitely think this palette is comparable to the Love palette and the Bronze palette that I have. Those two ones work really easy for me as well, and I love love using both of them. If you can get this on sale like I did, then it's even better because these palettes are really pricey. So I usually get my Natasha Denona palettes on sale. Definitely think this is a beautiful palette if you love a mauve toned color story. Okay guys, and this is it for my review of the Natasha Denona Retro Palette. I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this and find it interesting. Again, let me know if you want to see a 3 looks 1 palette down below, and also let me know what you think about this palette and if you maybe picked it up yourself too. I would love to know, and if you have a YouTube channel yourself and you made a video with this palette, then definitely comment it down below so I can take a look at your video as well. Also, if you did enjoy this video, then I would absolutely love it if you gave the thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you don't want to miss any of my videos. All of these things would help me so much with my channel and I'd really appreciate it. But with that said, and to thank you guys all so much for watching, I really hope you have an amazing day and I really hope to see you in my next video. Bye!